people. Today is November 19th, 2021. It's kind of hard to believe. And I am introducing today my lovely colleague from Austin Family Counseling who is going to jump on this live very soon. But his name is Mike, and he has such a cool journey. I'm so excited to share his journey with you guys and to have him share his journey with all of you. So some of you have probably seen his little, hey Mike, good to see you. So he has like an awesome background, and yeah, I'm just so excited to have him on the show today. So let me go ahead and invite him on here. Hi! Yay! We did it! We did it the first time. We did it on our first try.
I'm pro with this.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. I like just showed up. I just walked in. I like battled traffic. I may have sped or not sped, depending on if you're a cop or not. But I made it here.
Good. Well, not good. I mean, like, it's, I don't know about you, but this week was really crazy. Did you have a crazy week?
I think crazy is not the word I would use. I'm more curious about why your week was crazy.
Crazy busy. Like, I was in meetings all day today from 10 until like 6.
Yeah, that sounds right. Busy is, yes.
Yeah.
I had a weird intersection of work and life busyness where it was like doing life stuff right until work started, and then work right until like I had this other thing to do. Yeah, that's what I was going on.
Yeah. Oh man. Let me go ahead and introduce you.
Cool.
So this is Mike Rothschild.
Yeah, I don't
Rothschild, right?
just Rothschild.
Roth.
Like imagine there's no Roth.
Child?
Yeah.
There's an S in your name. What do you mean?
It's like a secret S. Nobody knows about it.
What? Are you serious? Okay. Rothschild.
Yeah.
Learn something today. Okay, well, this is Mike Rothschild. And Mike was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. And he went to the University of Arizona and received a Bachelor's of Arts in Middle East and North African Studies. Many questions for you about that. That's really cool. So he's been in Austin ever since and loves it here. He received his Master of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling at Texas State University. He is fiercely committed to advocating for and working with individuals with marginalized identities within and outside of the therapy room. So Mike also enjoys working with adults, teens, and families, and he specializes in religious trauma and abuse. And a fun fact about Mike, or a couple of fun facts about Mike. So when he's not working, Mike enjoys making music. He plays several instruments, reading, mostly fantasy, socializing. He loves a good coffee/tea hangout, walking, especially when it's not summer, and listening to podcasts. What podcast are you listening to right now?
I have gone down a rabbit hole of philosophy podcasts.
How has that been?
It's kind of fun. It just makes my brain think in ways that it's not used to thinking. Mm-hmm. There's a piece of me that like really enjoys clear boundaries, and philosophy is like, this is what rage is and what rage is not. And well, like, it's just like, here are the definitions of it, and everything that's not that is not rage. I don't know. I enjoy the clean.
Wow.
The cleanness of it.
Yeah. Like it's like kind of structured philosophy.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for philosophy because I feel like I could get very lost in it at times. Like you're like, whoa, it's just endless. I mean, so cool. And I can get lost and just go on forever and ever. But that's so cool. Does that fit into therapy at all? Like, is there an intersection?
It's like a Venn diagram where there's philosophy and then there's therapy and there's things in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes I will say this, sometimes when I'm like when I'm reading too many therapy books, I can't listen to philosophy because it's exercising similar parts of the brain sometimes.
Interesting.
So they can overlap.
Interesting. Cool. Well, let me pull up the list of questions, but while I'm doing that, so the first question for all of the viewers is just to go ahead and like kind of expand on just a little bit more about you as far as your journey. So I'm so interested. You were born and raised in El Paso, and then you went to the University of Arizona, got your Bachelor's of Arts in Middle East and North African Studies. That is so specific.
It's really specific. Actually, the degree itself was like Middle Eastern studies, and that's where it started. That's what I got into. Mm-hmm. And then with like the rise of the Arabs, I was learning about it during the Arab Spring, and it was like, well, we can't ignore all of these other Muslim countries that have really similar political things that like Syria and Iraq were dealing with, and so we've kind of lumped it together. And so it was like basically the Muslim countries and Israel.
I see. Okay. So
there's also Muslim countries outside of that, right? There's like Pakistan and, but for the most part, that was where the focus was.
What got you interested in that, in studying that, like as a whole? Like what was
the fun answer is that so before I went to college, I spent a year in Israel,
cool.
and being Jewish, and so that was kind of, I was already like, oh, let's take some classes on Israel and Hebrew and these things that I was already familiar with, and so that's what kind of got me there, and that was under the umbrella of Middle Eastern studies.
Cool.
So then once that, it was like, oh, well, while I'm here, let's learn about the history of the Middle East and kind of the larger context, which was really fun.
That's amazing. I mean, I have never met anyone else in my life who has studied that.
I'll tell you, it was really cool. I felt like I was super knowledgeable about current events, especially with like the Arab Spring, and everyone's like, what's going on with the Arab Spring? And people were like, I think I hear it in the news, but I don't really know what's going on. It felt really cool to be like, actually, I just wrote a paper on that.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there was like some ego with that. That was like, it felt really cool knowing stuff.
To understand, I felt like you could probably understand at a different level rather than just information that,
yeah, I'm not getting
on the news
from CNN.
Like you're in there, you're studying it like that. You just, like you said, you just wrote a paper on it. Like you're going to understand it a couple layers deeper than the average person.
It was really fun, and it's also something that, Middle East issues in our politics ain't going away.
Yeah,
that's always gonna be. It waxes and wanes.
Right.
But it's cool to have at least a general understanding of what's going on. That I've been a little bit removed from it, so I feel like I'm a little not as invested into it as I used to be, but it's still, I probably know more than the average person. Certainly.
Yeah. Probably a lot more. Have you ever thought about like kind of integrating that into the therapy sessions at all? Appropriately, like,
It's funny. Every time I say like a hobby of mine, people are like, oh, how are you going to connect that with therapy? I'm like, well, I can. Some of them fit really well. Some of them do not. I haven't quite figured this out. I had somebody one time try to refer me a client who only spoke Hebrew, and I was like, I'm not that fluent, so that's not gonna work. But that's as close as I've gotten to being able to like smush those things together. Working with Arab populations or Jewish populations or Muslim populations, that's maybe a goal of mine down the road. I think that would be really fun, but I'm not there yet.
And that's totally okay too. I mean, the cool thing about our field is that there's just so many things that you can do. Like even what you're doing right now, if you ever just decide one day, like, I just want to do something like completely different than what I'm doing right now. Like you have that option. Like we're just so versatile in our field. That was so interesting with what you were saying about just like the language. That's how I feel about sign language. I took it in college. I passed. So was I fluent? Intermediate, I would say. Like I was.
Could you speak to a third grader?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes.
That's pretty fluent.
Huh?
That's pretty fluent in my book.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I did understand. Okay, I'll give myself a little pat. Like, back then I could. Now, you know, I mean, with language, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. I mean, like, our little brains can only hold so much. And then we go through grad school, and then, like, our poor brains in grad school. So we got to make room for all that other stuff that we got to learn. But, yeah, I hear you. It sounds like something that it's an option on the table, but it's just an option. Like you're not like, I'm gonna like put it all together right now. That's kind of how I feel too about the paranormal stuff. Like I wonder what that would look like to kind of put the two together. And then I'm like, but do you want to do that? Right now I'm like, I probably not. Like probably not right now.
Right, and then you get labeled as the paranormal therapist, and then, right, which can be fun, but also boxing or like.
Yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely. So, talking about your journey as a therapist and where you are right now, go ahead and share just a little bit more about your story and how you got to where you are today with being in the therapist chair. Like, did you know that you wanted to go into therapy?
No.
I was about to say, if you were like traveling the world and stuff, because I know you've been to Africa.
I'm gonna parse that aside. The journey to counseling is a fairly recent one. Maybe 2 years or a year before I applied to grad school, I was like, I'm going to be a counselor. Right? It wasn't like a lifelong dream of mine. Now, in hindsight, as I look back, as I was taking classes and thinking about like, why does this interest me and why am I like naturally pulled to this? I started seeing signs in my own childhood. I was like, oh, I've been groomed for this my whole life. I just didn't realize it. So just chronologically, my dad before he had me in a previous life, he was a social worker, and so that was for sure that was where the embers started. I just remember him talking and teaching me things like the Johari window. It's just random things that he learned and learning he ran a bunch of training groups, and so he knew a ton about group dynamics. And I thought that was lame because I'm a 7th grader and who cares about group dynamics right now? And then, so I kind of like filed that in the back of my head. And then as I was going through grad school, I was like, oh, I've learned all of these things sound super familiar to me. I don't even think I took a psychology course in undergrad. I think maybe I did for like a semester or something, but don't remember it and probably failed it anyways. wasn't interested at that point. That wasn't where I was in my head. And then I graduated undergrad, took 5 years off of not having to go to school and not using my brain in that way. And it took that long for me to be like, oh, you know what? I really miss writing papers, which is not a thing I ever thought I would say. And so that was the beginning of like, maybe I could go for more schooling, and then what would my schooling be in? And then just a couple of small things were happening all at once where, you know, a friend of mine was going to see a therapist, and I never really talked to anybody who had seen a therapist and who talked about it. And so I was like, what's that like? So just learning about it. And then another friend of mine was going to Texas State, the counseling program there. And I was asking her about, what are the classes like? What are you learning? And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And that was kind of, and then I started seeing my own therapist, and I was like, I could do that.
Old. That's so, okay. So it's kind of, you had all these little like people and then your own therapist. And so you kind of just had all these, I don't really know what to call them, but
they feel like they were
go ahead.
Messages.
Yes. That's, yeah. Kind of like nudging you along.
And I say I've made, there's 2 really big decisions I've ever made in my life that felt like true to who I am. This is one, obviously, deciding to become a counselor just absolutely fit it. Like, I feel very lucky that I have tapped into something that I enjoy and I'm good at and feel, find meaningful. The other one was which we haven't talked about yet, but the other one is the decision to move to Austin and become a musician.
Okay.
So after grad school, I needed a thing to do. I needed a way to make money. What was I going to do with a Middle Eastern Studies degree? And I was playing drums like for myself, just for fun, put some music on and play around. And then I went to a B.B. King concert and said, I want to do that. And so I worked my butt off, and I learned how to be a little bit better at the drums than I was at the time, and wasn't planning on staying in Tucson, so I needed a place to go. And so I thought, I loved listening to country music. So I said, I'm going to take a trip from Tucson. I stopped off in El Paso, where I'm from, where my family was. And I said, I'm going to go to Austin, and then I'm going to Nashville and see whichever one's better, because they have country music is what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about it, but there's country music in those places. So I road trip. I stopped off in Austin. I stayed there for like 2 days and went and just saw some live music. And and then after that, I was like, nah, I'm good. I don't even need Nashville. I figured out where I'm going.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you got here and you're like, this is it. Like, welcome home.
Yeah. So I came here, decided to be a musician, joined a bunch of bands, auditioned for a bunch of bands, got kicked out of a couple bands, left a couple bands. Not for like drugs or anything. Just,
oh no, I was just like, why would they kick you out? You're so wonderful. I'm just,
not reality. Just sometimes you're not what they're looking for, or they're not what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I was a country drummer in a like rock and roll band, and they were like, okay, you're fine, but you're not what we need.
Yeah.
And then that was it. So that was kind of what pulled me out into Austin and started me here. And so that, sorry, the pulling back, that was the other decision in my life that I was like, that was true to my core. This is what I want. This fueled me. This was enjoyable.
That's amazing. So did you know anyone in Austin?
No. Not long after I got here, my brother joined me. He was out he was working on a cruise line as a fitness trainer. And his like contract was up and he needed a place to go. And he was also in the like, where should I go? And I was like, come down to Austin. So he joined me after that. And we've been here for the last 8 years.
Wow. That's awesome. Have you ever traveled to Nashville?
Yeah. In fact, I've been there twice with 2 different bands on tour.
Wait, you've been on tour? What is going on? Are you like a celebrity, like a low-key celebrity, and I'm in the presence of a celebrity and I just like don't realize it?
Probably not.
Oh So, okay, so you've been on tour before?
I've been on tour before.
Okay.
And I've been to Nashville a couple times that way.
Okay.
The city's wonderful. I'm very glad I don't live there. Seems it's a little too big city for me, which I think is crazy because I live in Austin, which is a gigantic city now. But it felt a little bit too big for me, and I think Austin's getting a little bit too big for me, but still is the right size.
I've been to Nashville only once, but being raised here, I was going to say right down the road, but it's kind of not. It's like an hour away. But right down the road from Austin, I guess. Nashville, it always reminded me of Austin. Like the whole time I was there, I was like, we're basically in Austin. Like we're basically, it's similar. The feel is the same. The music scene is very similar. But yeah, it sounds like you landed where you were supposed to.
That's very much how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, in your journey, the therapist career kind of found its way to you. Like you found your way to it, but it presented itself along the way. And
I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah. And it's been so interesting to do these talks with Tay because there's been people that I've known since they were teenagers that they wanted to be therapists. And then there's people that like didn't know until like a year ago. And everyone's journey is so different. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this career is sometimes you never know when it's going to call to you, but it does.
Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I recognized it in late high school. I found my way to the psychology field in high school. And then I figured out that I wanted to be a therapist senior year of undergrad.
So. When it's time to start looking for jobs.
Huh?
When it's time to start looking for jobs.
I mean, what are you going to do with an undergrad degree? Like, you can base... So I'm like, so what master's program am I going to go get into? Because, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
So when you had your own therapist and you had all the little messages that were coming to you, what made you decide to make that decision to become a therapist? Like what was that final pull?
It's funny. I don't know that I see it that way. I don't.
How do you see it?
Like you're making it sound like therapist was like this goal of mine, and I needed to do these steps in order to reach that. And I do not feel that way at all. It was, I just want to learn about these things, and maybe I can make some money along the way to support my terrible habit of wanting to learn more things. I think in honesty, probably about the middle of grad school, and when I'm in the thick of it, and I was like, oh, I could be a therapist. Like it still didn't quite hit me that was a real thing that I could do.
Yes.
So it wasn't that I was listening to those things and saying, oh, I want to become a therapist. It was something's pulling me in this direction, and I'm just gonna follow it.
Yeah.
Which sounds real spiritual now that I'm saying it out loud, but
a calling, kind of like a calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once I started, like we call it the clinical sequence at Texas State, where you actually start practicing the skills and practicing like how to reflectively listen with first it's a student, and then it's like a real human client. Right. Once that stuff started happening and I felt pretty natural, like I felt comfortable. I was nervous as hell, but it just was like fun and I'm enjoying it. That was when I started to realize that I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll be a therapist.
So, okay, I see. Yes. Yeah, those little practices, the most nerve-wracking thing to sit with another student. For me, oh my God, I just remember I got in there with that other student and I just told her like, so like I had my little paper and I was like, so what brings you in today? Just like what brings you in today? So nervous. I've never been more nervous. And then I finally just named it and I was like, I'm literally too nervous because they were like, I don't know about Texas State, but they had like cameras, like they were recording us. And I mean, that was just part of the class. Like that was the grade. And I finally just was like, I'm going to stop and breathe. Like I'm going to just get myself together to speak. and then we'll go. So you, well, I guess, so even when you went into the program, the grad school program, it sounds like you were still trying to feel it out.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was pretty committed at that point. I was spending decent money, and but I didn't know it would look like this. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I think I didn't know it would look like this. I didn't. First of all, I didn't know. I certainly didn't think I was going to be in private practice like I am now. It was always going to be agency work, and in all honesty, I didn't even think it'd be like individual. I'd be like, I'd run a group like my dad did, or I don't know, I'd find some other way to use these skills. I'd go on to get my PhD and be a professor. Like there was so many options I could have done with this. I was like, I don't know what this is going to look like yet.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. So if you didn't pursue, well, I think I know what this answer is going to be. Okay. I think I'm going to say, I'm going to just ask you, if you were not a therapist, what do you think you would be? And if you say musician, okay. And if you were not a musician, what do you think you would be? So if you were not a therapist or a musician, what do you think you would be?
I don't think I would be a musician if I wasn't a therapist.
Really? Okay.
Let me say this. I'm currently a musician. I still play music as a hobby and as something I do on the side. I don't, it's not professional. But I would prefer to keep it that way. So even if I wasn't doing counseling, I would still, I don't want to make my money making music. It is really hard to do. But what I was doing for counseling is photography. I was trying to be a professional photographer. So a different kind of art, I guess.
Yes.
I was shooting weddings and family portrait sessions. And then for myself, I was just going out and shooting street photography or landscape photography. That I think that was more for myself and fun and enjoyable. But yeah, I probably would have been a photographer, which is crazy because that is a whole other world.
That's so cool.
I will say that's one of the things that I've considered could be a really useful thing to marry with therapy. I've seen people do like mindfulness photography and kind of incorporating that into the therapy world, which is like, here's some coping techniques. You deal with your depression, deal with your anxiety. Here's tools and challenges and things like that.
I have never heard of that before. So what would that look like? Like mindfulness and photography?
My favorite exercise with this is to take I think it's a little harder with your phone because your phone's so distracting and it has so many other things on it. But I would say take a camera, even if it's like a crappy Kodak disposable camera, and go out and find specific things. So for me, my favorite thing is to pick a color like purple and go out on a walk in your neighborhood or somewhere not in your neighborhood, whatever you feel like is comfortable, and take pictures of all the things that are purple. And that is one that is, you're paying attention to what you're looking at, because normally you see a purple street sign and you see it as a street sign. You don't see it as, oh, here is a piece of color in my neighborhood. And then you start getting more creative and you say, take a picture of something purple next to, and make sure there's another human in it, in the photo.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're aware of these things that you weren't aware of before. And it is a little bit tapping into your sense of sight and your sense, especially with another person, your sense of community. This is a person who now lives in your neighborhood, that kind of thing.
That's amazing. Wow. I'm like soaking that in right now. That's powerful. That's powerful stuff. That would be so much fun, especially for a client that is so like artistic and like lives in the right side of just, oh my gosh, that would be beautiful work.
Not to mention, if they're actually taking a liking to it, you start asking them to like take photos of things that make them feel sad and take photos of things that remind them of their mom or their childhood, right?
Yeah. Oh, you could do so many things with that. That is so cool. So in your line of work, what do you find to be the hardest part about being a therapist and then the best part about being a therapist?
In that order, so for me, this is the thing that I feel like I've been struggling the most with since kind of starting the career part of this after the schooling part of it. I'm exhausted. I am emotionally exhausted all the time. No, I think that's still like, I'm still new to this for the most part, and I'm trying to get better at it. But it is, I keep thinking I can do more than I have the ability to. I used to be able to do all kinds of things, and now I'm spending a lot of, somebody said to me today, oh, my emotional stamina is still growing.
Yeah.
And so what will eventually be really easy for me to do, now I'm having to, it's difficult. The work that we do is not easy. It's not. And we make it look easy because that's our job. But when someone, even when it's not deep trauma, just the fact that we're there giving compassion to someone, that is something that is of mine that I'm giving to you, that I need to find ways of replenishing outside of the therapy room.
Right. Yeah. For
me, I think I'm learning that that's going to have to mean like time where I don't talk to any human, which is hard because I don't know that I'll call myself an extrovert, but I love being social.
Yeah.
And so that's very hard for me to say, okay, I need time away from humans. I love humans.
It's hard. It's a fine balance, because I think Sarah says hello Sarah. Yeah, our job is exhausting, and it's one of those things where I don't think that any kind of book could have prepared us for this. It was frustrating and also understandable, because I think the experience is one of the best teachers. But I mean, the emotional exhaustion is so real, and we're energetic beings, like that energy and that compassion, that energy that we exchange with clients, that goes somewhere. All that heaviness that we talk about, trauma or not, if it's just like stress from them, we hold that until we do something with it. And so we're like, at the end of the day, of just like, oh, like, yeah, Sarah says, so tired all the time and nobody told me, right? Yeah. And it's, people talk about compassion fatigue too, which is, I mean, a real thing. But I totally connect with you on just, at the end of the day, just be like, I'm done. Leave me alone. like respectfully, like love you all, and also leave me alone. Like me, and I'm going to the room, like I'm gonna watch some. I have to disconnect and recharge.
I think I'm still learning what are the things that recharge me emotionally. Right? A long time ago, I figured out, okay, when I'm like physically exhausted, I know how to recharge myself and all these other ways. But the emotion one is a new one for me. And so I'm at this point just saying no to everything and be like, no, I'm just going to do my own thing. And I'm going to sit in my room and read a book or watch TV or something. And that's going to be how I recharge right now,
Yeah.
which is, I'm sure I'll find other ways, but for now, that's what's working.
We're also in the beginning of our careers too. And from what I understand, I think, and I've talked about this with a couple other therapists who have been in the field for a while, I think that's a pretty common, like what we're going through is very normal for most people who step in. Like I remember when I first started seeing clients, I think I saw 3 and I was like done. I was like exhausted. And then it became 6, and then it became 9, and we're able to expand a little bit more. Sarah says, also why don't we have a coffee machine at the office? Good question.
I will say, expecting plenty of judgment appropriately. So I'm not a coffee person.
I'm not either. I will do water with caffeine in it, or like water with green tea or something in it. But I know, I feel like we're rare, like a rare species of people who don't do coffee.
For me, I love coffee. I miss coffee. I have too much anxiety to put more anxiety into my body. I just can't afford it.
I get you. Okay, so that everything that we just talked about goes really well, and you basically already answered this. How does being a therapist influence your personal life?
Yeah, so what we were just talking about for sure. I think it's kind of, I have two answers to this. They're 2 sides of the same coin, which is I think more people are like, oh, you're a therapist, let me unload all of my crap onto you, right? Like my dog just died and I don't know what to do, which I'm like, I'm happy to be a third friend, like I'm happy to be there for you, but now I'm that person that people go to, which is a new role that I am filling, right? I used to be good at that just because I was naturally a empathetic person, but now people are like, oh, Mike's a counselor, he knows how to deal with these things, he has all the resources, he knows how to do these things. So it's become like an increase, more people are asking for help, which I'm happy to give, in all honesty. It leads to the whole emotional exhaustion, but that's on me to figure out. On the other side, I'm also better equipped to handle it when people do come to me with those things.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like many therapists, before we became therapists, we were doing many therapist things to begin with, like being a listening ear and, you know, the calm in the storm and the person everyone goes to already. And so that doesn't really stop when we become therapists. If anything, it becomes intensified. Like we just, and I think that kind of comes with the territory too, of just, we go from being great to even greater, and that's just not our faults. Like, I don't know what they expect.
It's not
just as wonderful people. How's it been being a therapist during the pandemic for you, and like starting work during a pandemic? I'm in this group with you of starting in a pandemic. I started in June 2020.
So the craziest thing for me has been, I did all of my like schooling in the pandemic. So my first year and a half was like all of the academic classes where you're writing papers and reading stuff. And then the actual like practicing stuff, we like went into virtual. I saw a client for 3 sessions, and then the rest of it was all virtual. So I would say that I had a lot of support, and like it was nice having professors around me walking through how to do the virtual stuff, because certainly they were learning it too and they had no idea, but they had resources. And you know, here's some trainings on how to do this stuff virtually, and here is we recognize that everyone is way more exhausted because we're on screens all day, right? That kind of thing was really helpful. The interesting thing has been on the flip side is starting work and starting to see the first clients in person, which is still weird because we're not done with the pandemic. So some are masked and some are not. And that just navigating that whole thing was not anything. There were no books on how to do that as a therapist.
No.
And it was through conversations. It was through how do you do this? How do you do this? Okay, I'm going to blend that information into my own practice.
Yep. And I just realized too, you know, you didn't have the practicum and internship. Your practicum and internship was not in person. It was all virtual. And I'm thinking now, so I did mine at the psychiatric hospital. Gosh, I couldn't imagine how to do that, or how that would have gone. Not at the psych hospital, but just doing practicum and internship virtually. And then jumping into like Austin Family Counseling and doing in-person work. And you're over here being like emotionally exhausted. I mean, of course. Like, of course. Because
a lot.
In-person work it's a whole new level. It's a whole new dynamic of energy work. Because you're feeling the physical presence of people. And a lot of that's on an unconscious level too.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I have been able to recognize like subtle things that I forgot that I can recognize. Like somebody just shaking their foot,
Yep.
you know, it's a sign for me. I'm like, oh, this person might be a little anxious right now, right? Like that not exist. You have to use it based on like speech patterns and how fast they're talking, which is helpful, but not the whole picture.
Right. The only picture that we really got was like neck up. and you get like, which is really only 25%. If that.
Right.
So talking about, you know, switching to in person and just that transition for you, that has to be very, very stressful. And I'm wondering, one of the questions is, how do you manage your own stress as a therapist? And I feel like that's an ongoing, I don't know what therapist is like, I have totally figured this answer. Like, I know the answer to this question. And like, I would almost be skeptical if someone said that. Be like, I know all the answers to how to manage stress as a therapist. Be like, okay.
Well, I know how to manage all of stress, and so you're in good hands. I've solved it for you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Don't listen to me is the words of advice I would have.
Don't listen to me.
Personally, I'll say how I have managed it, different than how people should manage it, or how people could manage it. For me, especially through COVID, it has been long walks. In all honesty, recently I got a little burnt out with my walking because I kept going further and further and further, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I can go for 2.5 hours on a walk. And then I like didn't walk for a week, and I was like, oh, I wonder why. So I've kind of toned it down, and now I'm going on like medium-sized walks and trying to make that consistent. And the reason why that's helpful is, sure, just like getting out and getting some sun and getting some exercise is great. For me, I'll put headphones in, but I don't put anything on because I just don't want people talking to me. And I'm sitting with my thoughts. So I'm thinking, I'll probably give myself some time to think about my clients, be like, all right, what do I need to do today? Because I walk in the morning. I'm like, all right, what's going on today? But then it's also, okay, what's going on in my life? What needs attention? For me, it's a time to check in with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So having that check-in time and like not having one specific thing just rule the whole walk. It's just like, okay, thinking about this and then put it down, and then thinking about this and then put it down, and just kind of letting yourself be and just enjoying. Yeah.
And sometimes is, you know what? I miss my brother, and so I'll give him a call on my walk, right? Or sometimes it's, shoot, I totally forgot about all these things I had to do, and I'm putting on my to-do list the things I need to do when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful.
That's cool.
Mention like playing music and the other creative things that I do that's been keeping my sanity.
Yeah. What I have found helpful is for my stress is to have hobbies that are completely unrelated to my job. So like creative writing, like it's like I get to go and be in different worlds for a while. Like Sarah, if Sarah still's on here, like I make like freaking cups, like tumbler cups. That has nothing to do with therapy. Neither does my creative writing. Nothing to do with therapy. So it's like I get to visit different sides of myself and kind of be in different parts of myself and recharge that way.
You make tumblers for all of the guests of Talks of Tay, right? Talks with Tay.
You
right?
know what? That would be such a good idea. I love that. I love that and no. So, oh my God. That would be so awesome. Ah. If it was like an official thing, like if I blow up on the internet and become like a talk show host.
When you blow up on the internet?
Oh yeah, when I blow up on the, I'm gonna, all the OGs who got in on like this first year, I'll be personally making tumbler cups for everybody. That's a good compromise. Okay. And it's on live. It's on the internet. We can't take it back now. So it's your fault, Mike. It's your fault. Okay, so I have about 3 more questions for you. Did you get any specific questions that you wanted to answer on this live?
I got one good question.
Okay, when do you want to do that?
We could do it now or later. It's up to you.
Okay, let's go ahead and do it now.
Okay. I got was, what do you? So it's a timely thing. So talking about Thanksgiving, they asked, how do you deal with missing your family on Thanksgiving because you can't have Thanksgiving with them, but also being appreciative that you're not with your family on Thanksgiving?
So
like it's mixed feelings where it's like, oh, I'm sad that I'm not with my family, but also how nice it is that I'm not with my family.
What would your answer be? So conflicting feelings.
Yeah.
I
think it's hard. We want to have one feeling because it's simple, and we're like, this is how I'm feeling. The reality is both, like both of those things can both exist at the same time. And it's celebrating both of those, or at least celebrating is not the right word, but sitting with both of them and saying, okay, I'm experiencing grief and I'm sad, and sit with that, and watch your sappy movies, and especially with all like the Thanksgiving movies that are always about how wonderful it is to have family and you're not with your family. So it's just honoring that, and then also you don't have to be sad that your family's not there when you're enjoying the nice things that you get to do your own Thanksgiving this time, or you get to do it with the people that you love that are in this part of the world instead of where you normally go. So it's celebrating both of those.
Yeah, like giving yourself permission to feel both of those things and not feeling shameful that you're like, this is a holiday about family and coming together, and why am I feeling like relieved and happy and almost like I shouldn't feel this.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay. It's okay. You have permission to feel this, like, give yourself permission and give yourself self-compassion too. Like, you don't have there's nothing wrong with you. Like you're feeling two things at the same time, and you're human. I mean, I love to see my family, and I love the space away from my family.
Yes, we need both of those. We need both of those.
Mm-hmm. Say what?
We need both of those.
Both of those?
We need time with our family and time without our family.
Yeah. You know, and those emotions too, like those emotions are messages. So the emotions are probably like, yeah, I miss them, and I also value my time and the independence I have and the life I have created here for myself. There's probably a lot more than just the emotions or messages. Just leave it there before I ramble. That's a great question. That's a really great question. I feel like people's first, people will lean first towards shame, like self-shame.
I like the way you phrased it, that I shouldn't feel this way.
Yeah, almost like, yeah, or I'm a bad person for feeling this way. And that's where the self-compassion comes in of like, well, would you tell a friend that? Like, that self-talk, that narrative is, if you wouldn't tell a friend that, then shouldn't tell yourself that. But easier said than done as well.
Yeah.
That takes time. So, what are some of the common stigmas or misconceptions about therapy that you have encountered as a therapist? What is that face? You probably had like 5 things come to mind, and you're like, which one's appropriate to say on Instagram Live and for the internet to know forever?
It was not one. It was, all right, how do I prioritize these in order? And there's 1,000. I think I can think of 2 that come to the top of my head. If I remember the other one after the first one, I'll let you know. The first one is the simple one is people come to therapy and like for a specific thing, not like I want to fix my relationship with myself, right? That's a little bit more vague, but it's like my child is being obnoxious at night, right? And they expect this to be fixed in 8 sessions, which is a type of therapy maybe for others, but my opinion on those types of matters is that's deeper than just, oh, well, we'll just teach him how to do a different thing. Instead of yelling at his mom, I'll just take a deep breath, and that's all I need to teach him, and then he can go on his merry way. And it's recognizing that the reason he's yelling has a lot more to do with your real general relationships and how the family's functioning and all of these like way deeper things that people don't realize they were planning on getting to in therapy. So I think that's the biggest one that I'm finding hard to explain to new clients. That this is deeper than what you think it is.
Yeah. I find that hard as well, especially with like little clients, especially if they have behavioral problems. There's a lot of family where even if we get anyone who's under 17, they are the main client, and there's a piece of family therapy that goes into the work, and there's kind of a little bit of couples counseling that goes in there too. It just happens like that. But there's a lot involved when it comes to someone coming to therapy, especially a minor.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Let me try to remember what I was thinking of. can't remember it. I knew that was going to happen. It'll come back to me and we'll move on.
I'm with you on the number of sessions. A lot of people come in looking for solution focused therapy, and or that's what they want. They want the work of, they want the deep work, but they want the number of sessions in solution focused therapy, which is like shrunk significantly. And it don't work like that. Like it just.
I remembered my other the other one is that you have to wait for it to be so terrible for you to come into therapy. It has to be worth it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's expensive. It can be expensive. And so you don't want to just be like, oh, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable today. I'm going to go spend thousands of dollars on on some therapy. So I get the reason to slow it down if it's monetary, but people they push themselves so hard to do everything in their power to not have to go to therapy, as if therapy is the final option. If I can't figure it out in therapy, then life isn't worth living. Like, you have to wait to get all the way there, in which case the beginning of therapy is going to be brutal. It is going to be so hard to pull you out of that, because we're not going to be able to talk about the deep stuff. We're going to be like, let's get functioning first.
It's crisis counseling.
It's crisis counseling
for a while. And then once the crisis has settled, they're like, all right, we're good. And you're like, no, you sit down. You come right back in here, and we're gonna do some work.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
And we do this with other things. Like when our kid, we look for signs. When our kid has a fever, we take them to the doctor. We don't wait for them to start coughing up blood before they go see a doctor. Certainly go see a doctor when they start coughing up blood, right? Go to even if you're having a panic attack, go get help for sure. But when you start seeing the signs early, you can even show up for a therapy session and say, there's this thing that's bothering me. I'm not sure if it's a big deal or not. And it might not be, in which case you're fine. Don't go to therapy. You're good. But catch it early. Don't wait for it to be crippling anxiety before you go see a therapist.
Do you think people know what the early signs look like?
No.
Could they use more, could the general population use more education on warning signs? Kind of like yellow zone. When you're in the green and you're going more towards yellow zone, this would be the time to chat with the therapist, or not, just have a conversation with someone about, don't wait until you're in the red. And that's oftentimes when we get people, is when we're in crisis.
Yeah, and I think that's also that's a society thing too, right? In our media, that's what happens is the character goes see a therapist after they have the panic attack.
Yes.
Right? It's not, oh, I had some racing thoughts today and had a hard time going to sleep one night or 2 nights or a week. Yeah, people don't know that those are signs, right? Having a hard time sleeping is like, something's up. Listen to your body. It's not, oh, well, just take some medicine and then you'll be able to go to sleep better. Sure, that helps and it'll help you function, but you're bearing down the thing that your body was trying to tell you in the first place.
Yeah.
It's
not a really good way to put that. Yeah.
If nothing else, if somebody's listening to this and they've learned only that having a hard time sleeping is a sign of maybe go get it checked out, I will be very happy human.
Yeah. We could definitely use more just general education around, I think, is this one of your friends?
Yeah, Leah says, ooh.
Yeah, I think that society is trying to, I think more education is starting to happen in schools. They are starting to push a little bit more through, they're doing like a lot more SEL, like social emotional learning stuff. But and that's kind of new. Like that's, I mean, growing up in the, how old are you?
33.
33. Okay. So I'm about to be 28. So you would, like, when we were in school, like they weren't talking about that. Like, I mean, this is a newer conversation to be introduced to schools.
But I think we can't just educate the kids. There's a whole bunch of adults who weren't educated in school, and we got to find a way to get that message.
Whoopsie. Yeah, because the people who were not,
the you and me,
our age or older, who were not taught. Science is catching up. We're learning more, and when we know better, we can do better. It's just getting the information out there is the hardest part, I think. So the last 2 questions for you. So I've had a lot of questions before around defining the right fit. And so the question for you is, how do you know if your therapist is a good fit for you? And how would you define what the right fit looks like if for someone who was looking into therapy?
Yeah, I think of, and the way that I think about this is kind of like falling in love, where you don't really know it until you found it. If you are going home and saying, that was okay, I don't think it's the right fit. I think it's as simple as that. The way, if you dated somebody and you were like, he was okay, he didn't punch me in the face, so, you know, let's go on another date. Like, that's not a great standard. It's oh, I felt supported, and I don't know what's going to happen next, right? We've only had 1 session. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but this person sitting across from me seemed like they cared about me a lot. Not like, oh, they kind of cared about me. Like, get out of here. Like, now maybe my standards are high because I'm in the profession and I've met, not that I've had my own personal therapist, that's also true, but I've met a lot of really wonderful therapists, and it's taught me that you can find wonderful therapists and you don't have to settle for that guy who was fine. But I also recognize how hard it is to find a therapist, and because of that, how easy it is to be like, whatever, this one's good enough, let's take it. And I'm not faulting that. I did that when I was first looking for a therapist. I found plenty of they're fine therapists, and we got through stuff and we were able to do good work. But then I left. You know, I was like, okay, I can do something else, or I don't know. I think it's a matter of standards, and it's hard when you've never seen a therapist before, or when you've seen the way at the beginning. So it is hard to know, but at the end of the day, trust your gut, listen to yourself.
Yep. That was so well. And if someone watching this video now or in the future is on the fence about starting therapy, what would you say to them?
That's a good question. I mean, try it. That's where I would go. Go for 1 session. Just not even there. All your job is to find a therapist and book a session. That's it. You don't have to show up for it. You don't have to show up for 15 of them. Just book the session and try. And if it feels good, if you're like, okay, I want to go to this session, great. If you're like freaking out and you don't want to go, don't go, right? Like, it is your choice. Don't let somebody say you need therapy if you don't think you need therapy. Mm-hmm. I think you need therapy. Because everyone needs therapy. But if it is not what you are into, if it is not your jam, if you are scared of it, don't go.
Kind of listening to yourself. If the time doesn't feel right, okay, and that's your answer right now. And if you feel interested, that's also something to to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on it, which is I've noticed that a lot A lot of people go to therapy because they think they should.
Yes.
Either someone thinks they should or they think they should.
Yes.
And sure, that's a way to get your foot in the door. It's not the healthiest way to get your foot in the door, but at least it's, you know, you get you rip the Band-Aid off and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. That can be helpful. But listen to that should voice and saying, who's the one who's making you go? Is it you? Is it society? Is it like, listen to that. And if after you've like said, oh, okay, I don't need to hear that, I can just choose for myself, and you still want to go to therapy, go for it.
That's a great answer. Great. Yeah. Well, I can't follow that up. So, well, I guess one thing that I wanted to ask you about is you have a very specific niche of working with religious trauma and abuse. And I'm trying to be mindful of time. We're well over the hour mark, but I think this is important to share on the live. Can you speak a little bit more about what religious trauma and religious abuse is? Because I've seen it come up more in the media, and people are starting to talk about it, and I think people are more appreciative of the fact that it's becoming more of a conversation. And I don't think in a cancel culture-y way, but it's I think people are just talking about it.
Yeah, it can be really scary also because of how prevalent religion is in the world, that people are like, wait, religion bad? And that can be a really scary door to peer into, or a window to peer into.
Yeah.
Right? No. Religion's good, and if you think it's bad, you're an atheist, right? And that's not it. Religious trauma is when it messed you up, right? It's not being a religious person. It doesn't automatically give you religious trauma. Now, there are certain things associated with a lot of religions and what I'm calling fundamentalism or extremism, or even just rigid beliefs where what you believe in is fact. That can be, again, you can still believe that and not have issues with religion. But when your brain starts thinking, wait a minute, I have a doubt, and you're not allowed to question it, it teaches you not to listen to yourself. And you know, don't listen to yourself because God knows best, right? Those feelings, it can be really helpful to use religion in helpful ways. But when it starts, you know, you think one way, but your religion says something else, that can be really difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start making yourself smaller and smaller. I must not know what I'm talking about if I'm disagreeing with religion. And that, I mean, it's really similar to like emotional abuse, like our partner abuse, where, you know, one partner says, you don't know what you're talking about, and the other one was like, oh, I guess I was wrong, and you get gaslit. It's just we are starting to recognize that religion can have some of those qualities. And I'm saying religion as a whole. Really, it's how religion is used.
And religion, this really spreads. If I'm understanding, you're really speaking to worldwide, just the religion, like the institution of religion, period. Yeah, it's almost, and what I really hear you saying too is when someone thinks or feels differently than what their religion or church says, it almost causes someone to be dismissive of their own self.
Right. For you to question God. How could you possibly know more than God? And it's not God, it is this really specific version of God that was taught to you.
So, wow. What does the healing journey look like for someone who has had religious trauma or abuse? And I feel like that can go a bunch of different ways, most likely, but.
Sure. Yeah, I have to figure out like an umbrella answer. I think you got to start with recognizing it. I think that's the biggest thing, because I can't tell you how many people show up to my sessions. They're not coming in because they have religious trauma and they want to work on it. That's not getting them in the door. That's not the kind of thing that somebody says, oh, I really need to see a therapist from this. Usually it's, I have anxiety, I have depression. Every time I go visit my families back home and they make me go to church, I freak out, right? Those are the things that kind of just enter the therapy world, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I have some religious trauma. I hadn't thought about it that way. But it's recognizing what it is. And also it's also important to realize when that's not the case, right? You may have been, you may have some trauma, and you may have also had a religious family. And sometimes it can be confusing what was, let's say, what was your dad doing, or what versus what was him doing in the name of God. Those can be really difficult to parse out. Mm-hmm. And it's just recognizing what it is, and the healing part is listening to your body. What do you think you need to do with it? How do you make yourself bigger because you were taught to be small your whole life? That kind of thing. Those are all specific, but that's as close.
Almost returning the power to you, and very empowering. Just taking your power back, and not in a disrespectful way, like F all of that. I mean, no judgment if that's how a person feels, but, and also like, it's okay, I'm not going to allow that to dictate my life decisions anymore, and this can or cannot be a part of my life however I choose, and I'm going to, like, I get to make the decision. Putting yourself first. Like,
yeah, I think that a lot of people, especially with religious trauma, they go the opposite direction. They're like, okay, I want, because of this terrible thing that happened to do with religion, I never want religion in my life, and I'm not going to raise my kids with religion. Right?
I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that in the spiritual community. A lot of people who have had religious trauma will go, whoop, and they'll go like the way opposite way, and kind of get a little nasty sometimes. And I'm not saying that in a generalizing way, just you can and it's from a place of hurt. It is from a place of trauma. But I forgot where I was going with that. Just my point was like going the opposite way of just from, I think, in protective mode.
Yeah, and I think about it really similar to like parenting, where you want to do the exact opposite of what your parents did because your parents were terrible.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And well, sure, but now this is still your parents choosing how you're going to parent. Right? You are doing the opposite of your parents rather than you choosing how you want to parent.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, so I don't really know.
How did you find your way to this niche?
I had my own journey with it. I grew up Jewish. I still identify as a Jewish person. But my year in Israel, I was at a really, really strict right-wing, I guess you'd call it a seminary, something like that, school. Mm-hmm. That is for sure had its own emotional abuse or whatever, but and so that kind of already like pricked my ears up. I was like, hey, what's going on here? And then that was the first thing that helped me look behind the curtains, and I was like, what's back here? And I saw a lot of fear. I did so much out of fear. I was scared of doing the opposite of what my rabbi thought I should do. I was scared of doing something that would make me not a good Jew, right? Like there was just so much fear based. So I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller. And gave me a lot of anxiety. And that was probably when I went to therapy for. I was like, oh, I have a lot of anxiety. And it was like, oh, I wonder what's under there. And so I had my own personal journey with it. And then in my own, like, finding other people in that community of like, oh, you've been through that too. Oh, you've been through that too. I thought, oh, I can help others the way I was helped.
Yeah. You're doing some amazing work.
Thank you.
You really, really are. Do you have anything to share that you feel like we have not covered, or?
Oh, I did not say my favorite thing about being a therapist.
What is your favorite thing about being a therapist?
I feel like it's a lovely way to end this.
That is a lovely way.
This is gonna sound so corny and like what's the word? Gratuitous maybe, but it's the people I work with, and not just work. It's the people in this community of therapists. I find I like think in my head to myself. How wonderful is it that I get to go work with a bunch of people who want nothing other than to listen to me and to respect me and to respect my boundaries and to just be kind to each other and don't have, again, now I'm not speaking for all therapists, but in general, that's been my experience, that most therapists are like that. We're just kind and loving and want to work on ourselves and want to work on our relationships and don't want to screw other people over. So that has been easily the most rewarding part about this whole thing.
You meet some good people.
You meet the best people.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you go along the journey together.
And then you get invited to Instagram live stories with some of these people.
Yeah. That is true. That is true. Well, thank you for giving me an hour and a half of your Friday evening. I was really looking forward to this, and I'm so glad that we got to chat. I learned so much about you. But yeah, I'm looking at this picture of you on the drums right now. I want to hear your music in the future. So
you will be invited.
Cool. I hope so. Well, this wraps up episode 7 of Talks with Tay, and I will be going live next week, most likely for a probably like a special episode. I might have a special guest to be determined, or I'll go live by myself. But yeah, this was the lovely Mike Rothschild.
Nailed it.
And you can find him. I will put his like Instagram information in the bottom on the description, and you can also find him on the Austin Family Counseling website.
Thanks so much for that, Tay.
Oh, well, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in, present people on the live and future people who watch this. And y'all have a wonderful evening and a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.